Did you know Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels once ordered an entire film crew shot for sabotage? Or that German directors filmed the most expensive war movie ever made while Berlin was literally being bombed? World War II cinema from Germany isn't just controversial, it's explosive history that's still being censored today. Let's dive into the most shocking German films about the darkest chapter in their history. Number 20. Der Untertan, The Subject, 1951. East Germany threw the first cinematic punch just 6 years after the war with this savage satire that portrays Germans as pathetically obedient sheep. Based on Heinrich Mann's novel, the film follows Dietrich Hessling, a weak-willed opportunist who rises to power by blindly worshipping authority. Director Wolfgang Staudte pulled no punches, creating such a brutal caricature of German nationalism that West Germany banned it for 15 years. The film's most notorious scene shows Hessling literally kissing the emperor's empty throne, a moment so outrageous it became shorthand for German subservience. Shot in stark black and white, with expressionist angles, it makes Germans look like twisted monsters in their own national story. Critics called it cinematic revenge rather than art, while others praised its courage to confront Germany's cultural demons. The East German government initially celebrated the film as perfect anti-capitalist propaganda, but grew uncomfortable when audiences started questioning all forms of authority, including communism. The director later fled to the West, realizing he'd created a weapon that cut in all directions. As one German critic noted, "It remains the most vicious self-portrait any nation has ever committed to film. No wonder we tried to bury it." Number 19. Rotation, 1949. This forgotten Diva classic from East Germany dared to ask the most uncomfortable question possible in 1949. What turned ordinary Germans into Nazi supporters? Following a working-class family through the rise of Hitler, it shows the father joining the Nazi Party not out of ideology, but for a simple promotion at work. The film's brutal honesty made authorities on both sides of the Berlin Wall deeply uncomfortable. Director Wolfgang Staudte filmed in the actual ruins of Berlin, using real bombed-out buildings and rubble as his sets. In one haunting scene, the main character walks through his destroyed neighborhood, while actual residents, not actors, stare silently at the camera, their gaunt faces documenting genuine post-war trauma. The Soviet censors initially approved the film, believing it condemned capitalism. They quickly reversed course when they realized it also condemned anyone blindly following political movements, including communism. West German distributors refused to touch it, calling it too soon for German audiences to confront their complicity. East German film historian Frank Stern called it, "The first German film that understood Nazism wasn't delivered by aliens. It was embraced by our neighbors." The movie disappeared from circulation for decades, too honest for either German state to fully embrace. When finally screened at the 1989 Berlin Film Festival as the wall was falling, elderly audience members reportedly wept with recognition. Number 18. Die Mörder sind unter uns, The Murderers Are Among Us, 1946. The very first German film made after the Nazi surrender hit like a thunderbolt in 1946. Shot in the literal rubble of Berlin by director Wolfgang Staudte, it follows a traumatized surgeon who discovers his former Wehrmacht captain, a man who ordered the massacre of Polish civilians, is now living comfortably as a respected businessman. The film's gut punch comes when we realize the murderer isn't hiding. He's celebrated. The production faced daily crises, power outages, film shortages, and actors fainting from hunger during shoots. Soviet authorities, who controlled the production, demanded a vigilante ending where the doctor kills the captain. Staudte fought back, insisting the film end with justice through courts, not more violence, a radical concept in vengeful 1946. German audiences watched in stunned silence, seeing their destroyed cities on screen alongside their moral failings. Many walked out, unable to face the mirror it held up. American occupation authorities banned it in their zone, claiming it was too destabilizing for Germans to process. The Soviets, however, distributed it widely, seeing it as perfect propaganda against Western capitalism. Film historian Anton Case called it the beginning of Germany's cinematic confrontation with its crimes, a process that would take decades. The film's most chilling legacy? Several Nazi war criminals were actually identified by audience members who recognized them during screenings. Number 17. Jud Süß, 1940. The most viciously anti-Semitic film ever created wasn't just entertainment, it was a weapon. Ordered personally by Joseph Goebbels, this lavishly produced period drama portrays a Jewish financial advisor who sexually preys on Christian women while corrupting German society. SS units were actually ordered to watch it before carrying out deportations, making this the only film directly linked to the Holocaust. Production details revealed true horror. Director Veit Harlan claimed he tried to soften the script, but was threatened with concentration camp imprisonment if he didn't follow Goebbels' exact instructions. Actor Ferdinand Marion, who played the Jewish villain, desperately tried to avoid the role and later drank himself to death from guilt. The film's premiere was treated like a national celebration, with Nazi leadership attending in full uniform. It reached over 20 million German viewers, roughly a quarter of the entire population. Even more disturbingly, it was exported to occupied countries just before roundups of Jewish citizens began. After the war, Harlan became the only filmmaker tried for crimes against humanity for creating propaganda. Though acquitted on technicalities, he remained a pariah. The film remains legally banned in Germany, except for academic screenings with mandatory educational context. As film historian Susan Teagle noted, no other motion picture has so directly contributed to mass murder. The film's prints were ordered destroyed after the war, but copies survived, a poisonous historical artifact still used by neo-Nazi groups today. Number 16. Kolberg, 1945. The most insanely expensive German propaganda film ever made was literally being produced as Berlin burned. This Technicolor epic about a Prussian city resisting Napoleon's forces was meant to inspire Germans to fight to the bitter end. Director Veit Harlan received 4,000 actual German soldiers as extras, all while the Eastern Front collapsed and the Wehrmacht desperately needed reinforcements. The production's madness reached peak absurdity when Goebbels diverted trains carrying actual war refugees to transport extras and film equipment. In one scene requiring red cloth for flags, the propaganda ministry confiscated the last red fabric in Germany, fabric that should have made bandages for wounded soldiers. The film premiered in the fortress city of La Rochelle to German troops still fighting in France, and simultaneously at the Adlon Hotel in Berlin, as Soviet artillery was audible in the distance. Only weeks later, both venues were destroyed in fighting. Most Germans never saw it until decades later. Film critic Siegfried Kracauer called it the most expensive suicide note in history. After the war, director Harlan claimed he secretly made the film so over the top that Germans would recognize it as absurd propaganda, a claim historians dismiss as self-serving. The film's lead actress, Christina Söderbaum, later admitted, "We were making a film about heroic resistance, while actual German cities were being abandoned without a fight." The contradiction was so obvious that even true believers started questioning their sanity. Number 15. Die große Freiheit, Great Freedom, 2021. This shattering 2021 drama exposed a truth Germany buried for decades. Gay concentration camp survivors were sent straight to prison by Allied liberators. Following a gay man repeatedly imprisoned from the 1940s through the 1960s under Nazi-era paragraph 175 laws, it reveals how the liberal post-war German government continued persecuting LGBTQ+ citizens using Hitler's exact legal code. Director Sebastian Meise faced funding rejection from multiple German film bodies who claimed the story was historically insignificant. The breakthrough came when Austrian funding stepped in, ironically making this quintessential German story technically an Austrian film. Lead actor Franz Rogowski lost 33 pounds to portray different imprisonment periods without digital effects. The film's most devastating revelation shows German courts using actual Nazi court documents against gay defendants into the 1960s. When screened at the German parliament in 2022, it prompted formal government acknowledgement of this ongoing persecution, 75 years too late for most victims. Critics called it the final demolition of the myth that Germany cleanly broke with Nazism in 1945. Right-wing politicians attempted to block its inclusion in German film awards, claiming it tarnishes the heroic Allied liberation. The film won the Un certain regard jury prize at Cannes, with jury president Andrea Arnold stating, "It exposes how fascism doesn't end with dictators. It lives on in democratic institutions when we aren't vigilant." Number 14. Triumph des Willens, Triumph of the Will, 1935. The most influential propaganda film ever created wasn't just documenting history, it was manufacturing it. The entire 1934 Nuremberg rally was specifically designed and staged for Leni Riefenstahl's cameras, making it perhaps the first political event created primarily as a movie set. Hitler personally approved every camera angle in advance, creating a fascist fantasy world that became more real to many Germans than reality itself. Riefenstahl's technical innovations remain disturbingly brilliant. She pioneered tracking shots by building rails through crowds, mounted cameras on flagpoles for sweeping vistas, and created the first aerial dolly shots by installing cameras in elevators. She used 30 cameras and over 120 technicians, the largest film crew assembled up to that point. The film's power comes not from speeches, but hypnotic visual rhythms. Endless columns of matching bodies moving in perfect unison, transforming humans into architectural elements. After the war, Riefenstahl claimed it was merely a documentary, but court evidence proved Hitler's office directly supervised its creation as deliberate propaganda. Film scholar Roger Ebert called it one of the most important films ever made, and one that should almost never be seen. It remains legally restricted in Germany, with educational screenings requiring government permission. The film's visual language, low angles, dramatic backlighting, masked formations, was so effective that its techniques still appear in everything from Star Wars to campaign commercials, a cinematic virus that infected global visual culture. Number 13. Hitler Junge Quex, Hitler Youth Quex, 1933. This early Nazi propaganda film remains the most disturbing because it specifically targets children, creating a heroic martyr narrative around a 12-year-old Nazi youth murdered by communists. Based loosely on a real incident, it portrays Hitler Youth members as clean-cut, moral teenagers fighting against depraved, sexually promiscuous communists, essentially creating the Nazi version of a teen adventure movie. The production reveals calculated evil. Director Hans Steinhoff conducted extensive research with child psychologists to maximize emotional impact on young viewers. The film was mandatory viewing in German schools, and Hitler Youth membership surged dramatically after its release. Joseph Goebbels personally edited scenes, focusing on creating a spiritual experience that would transform normal boyhood desire for adventure into political fanaticism. The film's Hitler Youth song became a nationwide hit, with children singing it in playgrounds across Germany. The most chilling aspect? After screening, local Hitler Youth chapters would conduct immediate recruitment drives, signing up emotionally manipulated children before they even left theaters. Film historian Erich Rentschler noted, "While adult propaganda focused on economic and political arguments, youth propaganda like Quex targeted raw emotion and identity formation. It's why so many teenagers became the most fanatical Nazis." The film remains restricted in Germany, with one lawmaker noting, "It's not just historical toxin, it's an instruction manual for youth radicalization that still works on vulnerable minds." Number 12. Der ewige Jude, The Eternal Jew, 1940. This isn't just the most vicious anti-Semitic film ever made, it's a direct link to genocide. Presented as a documentary, it intercuts footage of Polish ghettos, deliberately made squalid by Nazi authorities, with shots of rats carrying disease. Heinrich Himmler screened it for SS units before they conducted mass killings, making it perhaps the only film that directly facilitated murder. The production history reveals calculated malice. Director Fritz Hippler later admitted they deliberately prevented Jews from washing before filming and crowded them into the worst conditions possible. The film's most infamous sequence shows actual ritual kosher slaughter of animals, footage so disturbing that even Nazi audience members reportedly vomited in theaters. German audiences were lukewarm. Many found it too extreme, even by Nazi standards. But its real purpose was radicalizing officials who would implement the Holocaust. After the war, Hitler claimed he merely assembled footage under orders, but evidence showed he enthusiastically pitched increasingly extreme visual connections. Film historian Susan Teagle wrote, "While Jud Süß manipulated emotions through drama, Der ewige Jude aimed to provide scientific evidence justifying extermination." The film remains banned in Germany except for scholarly research. Its narration script was personally edited by Hitler, who demanded stronger language connecting Jews to supposed racial contamination. Most disturbing is its continuing life. Neo-Nazi groups still distribute it online, and counterterrorism experts have found it on the computers of multiple mass shooters targeting Jewish communities. Number 11. Der Hauptmann, the Captain, 2017. This gut punch of a film delivers the most shocking true story you've never heard. In the chaotic final weeks of WWII, a 19-year-old German army deserter found an abandoned captain's uniform, put it on, and proceeded to form his own sadistic death squad that murdered over 70 people, including fellow German soldiers. Director Robert Schwentke filmed in stark black and white, creating a nightmare vision of how easily ordinary people become monsters when given authority. The production faced intense backlash even before filming began. Several German funding bodies rejected it, claiming it would trivialize Nazi atrocities by focusing on an anomalous incident. The filmmakers countered with extensive historical documentation, proving the case was actually representative of widespread breakdown in military discipline during Germany's collapse. The film's most controversial scenes show German civilians eagerly joining the fake captain's executions of deserters, exposing how bloodlust and fascist obedience continued even as the Reich crumbled. Lead actor Max Hubacher lost 25 pounds during production and reported having nightmares throughout filming. Critics were divided, with Der Spiegel calling it a nauseating but necessary corrective to the myth that Nazi atrocities required elaborate systems. They required only human nature plus permission. Several theaters in Bavaria canceled screenings after elderly audience members became physically ill during the execution scenes. The real-life imposter, Willy Harold, was executed by British forces in 1946, but the film's most disturbing suggestion is that many captains were never caught at all. Number 10. Deutschland, Bleiche Mutter, Germany, Pale Mother, 1980. This feminist bombshell detonated in 1980, West Germany by suggesting that German mothers, long portrayed as innocent victims of the Nazi era, were actually complicit in passing fascist values to their children. Director Helma Sanders-Brahms created a semi-autobiographical portrait of her own mother that shows how German women perpetuated authoritarianism through family structures even after Hitler's defeat. The film's production was fraught. Sanders-Brahms mortgaged her home to complete it after funding was pulled following early footage screenings. German television stations refused to broadcast it, claiming it dishonored German motherhood. The director received death threats, and several theaters showing the film had their windows smashed. The movie's most controversial scene shows the mother telling her daughter fairy tales that normalize violence and obedience, suggesting fascism was transmitted through bedtime stories, not just political rallies. When the film finally aired on television in 1985, it was heavily edited, removing nearly 30 minutes of the most accusatory material. Feminist critic Alice Schwarzer declared it the first film that dares suggest German women weren't just Hitler's victims, but his accomplices in the home. Male critics dismissed it as hysterical and unfair to the war generation, while younger Germans embraced it as breaking decades of silence about family complicity. The director later revealed that her own mother never spoke to her again after seeing the film, stating simply, "You've destroyed everything beautiful about our past." Number 9. Mein Führer, die wirklich wahrste Wahrheit über Adolf Hitler, My Führer. 2007 Germany's first Hitler comedy arrived with a thud in 2007, proving some wounds still hadn't healed enough for laughter. Director Danny Levy created a satire where a depressed Hitler seeks help from a Jewish acting coach to prepare for his final speech. The film suggests Hitler was impotent, bedwetting, and psychologically broken. Less monster than pathetic man-child. German audiences weren't ready to laugh. The production faced bizarre challenges. Actor Helge Schneider, playing Hitler, refused to give the Nazi salute even on camera, creating awkward shooting workarounds. Berlin authorities initially denied permits for filming Hitler scenes at actual historical locations, forcing last-minute set changes. Most surreally, the costume department had to create Hitler's uniform from scratch, as displaying actual Nazi regalia remains illegal in Germany. Critics savaged it, with Die Zeit calling it neither funny enough to work as comedy nor serious enough to count as commentary. The film grossed only $3 million against its $5 million budget, making it both controversial and a financial disaster. Jewish community leaders were divided, with some appreciating the attempt to deflate Hitler's mythic status, and others finding it dangerously trivializing. Director Levy defended his approach. Germans have spent decades speaking about Hitler in hushed, serious tones, which maintains his power. Only by making him ridiculous can we truly defeat his ghost. The film's legacy remains contested, with film historian Johannes von Moltke noting, "It revealed Germans still couldn't decide whether Hitler should be analyzed, demonized, or mocked, and failed at all three." Number 8. Anonyma, Eine Frau in Berlin, A Woman in Berlin, 2008. This harrowing drama exploded one of Germany's greatest taboos, the mass rape of German women by Soviet soldiers in 1945. Based on an anonymous diary, it follows a journalist who strategically chooses a high-ranking Soviet officer as a protector to avoid gang rapes. When published in the 1950s, the original memoir was denounced as besmirching the honor of German women. The 2008 film reignited the same controversy. Production faced unique challenges. Director Max Färberbuck struggled to find German actresses willing to play rape victims, as many feared being associated with what some still considered a shameful topic. The Russian embassy formally protested the film, calling it anti-Russian propaganda, despite historical documentation of the estimated 100,000 Berlin women raped in 1945. The film's most controversial aspect was its refusal to portray German women as passive victims, instead showing their strategic negotiations for survival, including trading sex for protection and food. German feminist groups split violently over this portrayal, with some praising its honesty and others condemning it as victim-blaming. Critic Jens Jessen noted, "For decades, these women's experiences were silenced twice, first by Soviet denials and then by German patriarchal shame." When the anonymous author was identified posthumously as journalist Marta Hillers, her relatives tried unsuccessfully to block both the book's republication and the film. At screenings, elderly German women reportedly stood up and shared their own long silent experiences, some speaking for the first time in over 60 years. Number 7. Wir Kinder vom Bahnhof Zoo, Christiane F., 1981. This nightmarish journey into teenage heroin addiction shocked Germany by connecting Berlin's drug epidemic directly to the country's unprocessed Nazi past. Based on the true story of 14-year-old Christiane Felsherinov, it showed how the children of Nazi generation parents sought escape through self-destruction. The film explicitly blamed Germany's emotional repression about its history for creating a youth crisis. Director Uli Edel insisted on brutal authenticity. Real addicts were hired as extras, actual shooting galleries were used as locations, and 14-year-old actress Natja Brunkhorst was taken to witness real addicts injecting heroin to prepare for her role. The production caused a political crisis when Berlin authorities tried to shut down filming, fearing it would damage the city's reputation. The film's most shocking scenes show children as young as 12 prostituting themselves at the Bahnhof Zoo train station. Footage so disturbing that several European countries initially banned it or classified it alongside pornography. David Bowie, who appears in concert sequences, tried unsuccessfully to have his scenes removed after seeing the final cut. West German Education Minister Jürgen Müllermann called it a necessary shock to the German conscience, ordering screenings in schools despite parental protests. East Germany banned it completely, claiming it showed the inevitable moral collapse of capitalism. The real Christiane F later criticized the film's impact, noting, "They made me into a cautionary tale, but afterward, Bahnhof Zoo became a tourist attraction for voyeurs and actually increased teen drug use." The film's lasting power comes from its unspoken accusation. Germany's junkies were the price paid for the nation's refusal to face its past. Number 6. Das schreckliche Mädchen, The Nasty Girl, 1990. This darkly comic true story follows Bavarian teenager Sonja, who naively enters a national essay contest with the topic "My Hometown During the Third Reich," only to discover her entire community will do anything, including attempted murder, to hide their Nazi past. Director Michael Verhoeven created a damning portrait of Germany's post-war generation as willing conspirators in silencing history. The production was directly sabotaged. The real Bavarian town of Passau refused location permits, church authorities blocked access to records, and the director received death threats. Most shockingly, the real-life nasty girl, Anja Rosmus, had her home vandalized during filming and eventually had to leave Germany entirely. The film brilliantly uses surrealist techniques to show how history was literally being erased. Archives mysteriously burn, records disappear, and witnesses suddenly develop amnesia. The most controversial scene shows respected town officials literally walling up a room of documents while insisting to the teenager, "There's nothing to find." Critics recognized its explosive potential, with Der Spiegel calling it a precision-guided missile aimed at Germany's comfortable amnesia. The film was nominated for an Academy Award, but snubbed by German film prizes, with the Bavarian Film Board calling it inappropriate for international representation of German cinema. After its release, several real German towns faced a wave of similar student investigations, uncovering countless hidden Nazi collaborations. As Verhoeven later noted, the film's greatest achievement wasn't artistic, but practical. It created a generation of teenage historians who refused to accept their grandparents' silence. Number 5. Stalingrad, 1993. This brutal war epic was the first German film to portray the Eastern Front nightmare from the Wehrmacht perspective, creating immediate controversy. Following a German platoon from the sunny Italian coast to their freezing deaths in the Stalingrad cauldron, it dared to show German soldiers as both perpetrators and victims, a nuance many weren't ready to accept in 1993. Director Joseph Vilsmeier created unprecedented battle realism, with production details bordering on cruelty. Actors were kept in freezing conditions for authenticity, underwent actual military training, and wore period-accurate wool uniforms that offered little protection from the cold. Several cast members developed hypothermia during the winter shoot in Czechoslovakia. The film's most controversial aspect was its portrayal of Wehrmacht soldiers witnessing SS atrocities against Russian civilians, showing their complicity through inaction while still maintaining their humanity. This complexity enraged critics from both sides, with right-wing groups claiming it demonized German soldiers and left-wing critics arguing it whitewashed Wehrmacht war crimes. international reactions split along predictable lines. Russia banned it outright, calling it fascist rehabilitation, while American critics praised its unflinching portrayal of war's brutality. German historian Hannes Heer noted, "The film's greatest achievement is making Germans uncomfortable with both simple condemnation and simple exoneration of ordinary soldiers." When the film was finally broadcast on Russian television in 2003, it broke viewership records, with many viewers reporting it was their first time seeing German soldiers portrayed as anything other than cartoonish villains. Number 4. Der Untergang, Downfall, 2004. This claustrophobic portrayal of Hitler's final days in the Berlin bunker created an international firestorm by doing the unthinkable, showing Hitler as a human being. Based on the testimony of Hitler's secretary Traudl Junge, it portrays the Führer's physical decline, emotional outbursts, and moments of banal normalcy, creating a monster more terrifying because of his recognizable humanity. The production faced unprecedented scrutiny. Actor Bruno Ganz spent months studying Hitler's voice and mannerisms, working with a Parkinson's disease specialist to accurately portray his deteriorating physical condition. German film boards initially hesitated to provide funding, fearing international backlash. Most controversially, director Oliver Hirschbiegel recreated the bunker to exact specifications, working from Nazi architectural plans sealed since 1945. Critics divided violently. German filmmaker Wim Wenders accused it of humanizing the inhuman, while historian Ian Kershaw defended it as destroying the Hitler myth more effectively than a dozen documentaries. The most unexpected afterlife came when the film's tantrum scene became an internet meme, with Hitler raging about everything from Xbox failures to sports losses. A development that horrified the filmmakers but arguably normalized critical treatment of Hitler. Jewish filmmaker Danny Levy criticized the film's perspective. It shows Nazi leaders as humans, but their victims remain distant statistics. The Simon Wiesenthal Center initially condemned the film before later acknowledging its historical accuracy. Bruno Ganz reported receiving disturbing fan mail from neo-Nazis who found his portrayal inspiring rather than damning. The ultimate proof that even the most careful historical recreation can be misappropriated. The film's lasting controversy proves Germans still struggle with the question, does understanding Hitler's humanity make his crimes more comprehensible or more monstrous? Number 3. Unsere Mütter, Unsere Väter, Generation War, 2013. This explosive miniseries followed 5 German friends from 1941 through the war's aftermath, directly challenging the post-war myth that only Nazi leadership was guilty while ordinary Germans were innocent victims. Showing Wehrmacht soldiers participating in war crimes, civilians benefiting from Jewish deportations, and widespread knowledge of the Holocaust, it shattered comfortable national narratives about the good Germans who supposedly knew nothing. The production created international incidents. Poland formally protested its portrayal of Polish resistance fighters as anti-Semitic. German television required unprecedented viewer advisories before each episode. Most controversially, director Philipp Kadelbach insisted on filming execution scenes in single takes without cuts, forcing actors and audience to experience the full duration of killing, a technique critics called moral torture. The series drew 7.6 million German viewers, sparking nationwide debates that dominated talk shows for weeks. Elderly Germans publicly confronted their children for the first time about wartime experiences, with psychologists reporting a surge in family therapy sessions addressing long-buried war traumas. Historian Habbo Knock noted, "It forced Germans to abandon the comfortable myth that Nazis and ordinary Germans were somehow different groups." Polish diplomat Marcin Bosaki called it falsification worse than Holocaust denial, while Israeli critics praised its unflinching portrayal of German complicity. Actor Tom Schilling, who played a Wehrmacht officer, reported receiving disturbing fan mail from neo-Nazi groups who misinterpreted his character as heroic rather than morally compromised. demonstrating how even critical portrayals can be twisted by those determined to misunderstand history. Number 2, Das Boot, 1981. This claustrophobic masterpiece about a German U-boat crew did the unthinkable in 1981. It made international audiences root for Nazi submariners. Director Wolfgang Petersen created such a visceral portrayal of the terrifying underwater war that viewers forgot these sailors were fighting for Hitler's Germany. This moral ambiguity created immediate controversy. Were audiences betraying Holocaust victims by sympathizing with Wehrmacht forces? The production's brutal authenticity bordered on sadism. The cast was forbidden to go outdoors during the 40-day shoot to maintain their pallor, were denied showering to develop authentic body odor, and worked in a real-scale submarine interior where temperatures reached 120 degrees under lights. Cinematographer Jost Vacano developed a special gyroscopic harness to film while running through narrow corridors, dislocating his shoulder multiple times during shooting. Jewish groups initially protested the film, with Holocaust survivor organizations in France attempting to block its release. The controversy intensified when the film received 6 Oscar nominations, with several Academy members resigning in protest over honoring a film humanizing Nazis. German critics were equally divided. Conservatives celebrated it as the first non-apologetic German war film, while leftists condemned it for separating military service from Nazi ideology. Director Petersen defended his approach. The tragedy is that these ordinary men, many not Nazis themselves, fought bravely for a criminal regime. That moral complexity is the true horror of fascism. The film's lasting impact came from forcing audiences to confront uncomfortable questions about duty, country, and humanity. Can we acknowledge the courage of individuals while condemning the cause they served? Number 1. Er ist wieder da, Look Who's Back, 2015. The most conceptually dangerous German film ever made actually put a Hitler impersonator into modern German streets with hidden cameras and captured disturbing public reactions. Based on Timur Vermez's satirical novel, the film follows Hitler awakening in 2014 Berlin, where he becomes a YouTube sensation, when people assume he's a brilliant method actor. The hidden camera segments revealed actual Germans enthusiastically interacting with Hitler, taking selfies, and sometimes expressing alarming support for his views. The production created ethical nightmares. Actor Oliver Masucci remained in character during unscripted public encounters, with security teams nearby in case of violence. Several people who were filmed making supportive comments to Hitler later sued to have their faces blurred. Most controversially, director David Venant specifically targeted areas with high immigrant populations to capture Hitler's reactions, a technique many critics called exploitative. The film became a surprise blockbuster, earning over $21 million while triggering national soul-searching about rising far-right sentiment. Critics were divided between those who saw it as brilliant satire, exposing lingering fascism, and others who feared it, normalized Hitler as an entertainment figure. Its most disturbing scene shows real Germans confidentially telling Hitler about their xenophobic views, believing they'd finally found someone who understood them. Jewish organizations initially condemned the film before its release, then modified their position after seeing it, with the Central Council of Jews in Germany calling it a powerful warning about how easily extreme views can return. The film's most unsettling legacy appeared during the 2017 German elections, when far-right AfD party rallies featured supporters directly quoting the movie's satirical lines as serious political positions, proving the fine line between satirizing extremism and accidentally providing it a new script. From propaganda masterpieces that helped enable genocide to modern films still reckoning with national guilt, German cinema continues wrestling with its darkest chapter. Which of these films crossed the line between historical examination and dangerous glorification? The most uncomfortable question remains: why do certain viewers still misinterpret these warning stories as inspiration? Share your thoughts below. But ask yourself why certain Nazi films continue fascinating audiences 80 years after Hitler's defeat. Is our interest really just historical curiosity? Or something darker we're not admitting?